Hi, and welcome back to another edition of the Power BI Monthly Digest, this month for the month of July. My name is Devin Knight, and I'm here with
Manuel Quintana, and we've got quite a bit going on in this update. You know, we had one last month. It was impactful. There was some things there. It was a little bit lighter.
Right.
That is not the case for this one.
No, not at all.
This
one has some excellent goodies in it.
It really does. It really does. A ton of stuff. As always, the Power BI team does a great job of listening to the community. There's a couple of things that have been kind of floating around for a bit, actually, and they're here.
Yes.
So we know you're excited just with that little intro. So I guess let's dive right into it.
We're not going to tell you yet. Yeah, we're not going to tell you what it is.
Yeah,
I actually want to show it, at least show on screen here, a partially built model. So I'm going to start off with a model that's already been created. And then Manuel's going to lead me into the new thing we're going to look at here, right?
Well, yeah, it's around importing. So with that being said,
let's go to it.
We actually have right now a live query. So we're going to need to actually close out of this one because we've already done a live connection here.
No. We do not. Well, first of all, it's Directquery.
That's right. You're right. It's Directquery, but we're going to import data.
That's right. But we can now do, this is the big ooh la la of this release, is something new called the Composite Model.
Are you trying to tell me that we can now use Directquery?
Yes.
With import?
Yes.
It's here, people.
Yes.
It's here, finally.
You've been waiting for this for a long time. So very briefly, for those that don't know what Directquery is, this gives you the ability to connect to, let's say, for example, a SQL Server database directly, Directquery, without having to import the data.
Correct.
And a previous limitation was if you're using and leveraging this feature called Directquery, you couldn't then also import data from another source. You couldn't even do Directquery to another source. Not a limitation anymore. So
one-on-one. And Devin's right, just to make sure, as of right now, the way that this is being released, it is focused towards Directquery, whereas Live Connection is something else like for analysis services.
Yeah.
So as of right now, we're looking specifically at Directquery and importing.
Yes. So what you can see here in our example is just to verify. You can look in the bottom here. You can see that this is a Directquery connection right now. The storage mode says Directquery on the bottom there. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to connect into another data source. So all the sources I have right now are Directquery, but the new feature here now is I can actually import data from anywhere else and bring it in. So I'm going to go up to the Get Data section here. Very simple. Bring in an Excel file. We'll make this simple. I have a temp. It's actually temperature data here. And we're going to bring this temperature data into my model. And I'll select the table that we're going to use for this scenario. This is actually the spreadsheet. And hit load. Now,
and normally it was at that point, right?
Yeah, in fact, I actually have the older install of the Power BI desktop right here I'd like to show you. Same exact model, okay, same exact Directquery source. This is the older version of Power BI. If I were to try and do the exact same thing we just did a moment ago, it would let me get a little ways to it. So I could select the spreadsheet and hit load.
It was like almost like false hope, like we were almost there. You know?
But then it tells me here, switching to import mode is not allowed. It's going to switch my Directquery to all import if I were to go any further.
Yeah.
So I could switch to import if I wanted to, or in my case, I'm going to use the new model that we have designed that now allows me to actually import both. Now, we've had this example up. I think it actually prompted you with a dialog box here as well, just letting you know that you could be. I think it's a security warning that pops up whenever you have an imported source and a Directquery source. It didn't pop up here, but I think that's because we had this example up previously.
Probably stored in cache or something.
Yeah. But you can now see that I have a Directquery source and you can actually really tell this by looking in the bottom now. You can see the storage mode is called mixed. So we have mixed storage mode that's been enabled here. And if we want to, we can go over to the relationship view and we can actually see our new table listed here.
Nice.
Right now next to our Directquery. You can also see underneath the data view, if you go to the data view, you'll see if you're selecting a Directquery table that you actually can't see the results. That's been the case forever because whenever you have a Directquery source, you never had the data view. But for any tables that are imported, you can see the results here. All right, now that's one thing. Really, really cool, right?
Yeah, and that's a huge feature that we've been waiting and looking for. So fantastic, but they didn't just stop there as well. I mean, now the idea is we have the capability of having an imported source along with a Directquery source. Right. But for example, right here we've got 4 different tables as part of our Directquery source. So not only that, they've created somewhat of a hybrid type of situation with your direct queries, right?
They have.
What was the name they have for that one is
Dual.
That's right, dual.
So there's three now. There's three different storage modes. You'll have import, direct query you've always had, and dual. Now, one thing that I should have shown in the very beginning is this is still in preview.
Yes.
So this is a feature that you do need to turn on. This is also a feature that's available to anyone, right?
That's right. This is not going to be bound beyond the kind of constraints of just being premium. I know we talked about incremental, which was exciting, but that was kind of locked behind premium. This is going to, as of right now, be available for anyone.
Yep.
Which is important.
So I think it probably makes sense here. Before I show this next feature, I need to show you how to turn on the preview capabilities.
Absolutely, yes.
And this preview feature will also be part of what we did in our last example, where you can have that composite model. So let me show you real quickly how to turn on the preview feature, and then we'll show you how you can turn things onto dual mode. So if I go obviously up to the File menu here, if you turned on any preview features before, this is not something new for you, but you'll go to File, Options and Settings and Options. And from the Options menu, you'll go underneath the preview features, and you'll find composite models. When you turn on composite models, it turns on a couple really cool features. We've shown one where you can import from multiple data sources. We're about to show one called dual, and then there's one more that we're going to look at here as well that's related to this composite models preview feature. So let's go ahead and first talk about this dual mode. So you talked about it a little bit. The idea here being that I can have direct query sources. I can have imported sources. I now have this third option called dual. Tell me what dual means.
So really the idea here is, as before, if you wanted to do import, it was kind of an all or nothing, right?
Right.
If I'm connecting to this SQL data warehouse that has all this goodness that I need, and I know I want some of the elements, for some of the performance elements for direct query,
right?
I can do that, but that was it. I brought them all in. But now within that set, in our example, we have these 4 tables. Let's say we have something that is a little more of a static table, some sort of reference table, something that's less dynamic, doesn't change as much.
Yeah.
But of course, those fields potentially are going to be part of visuals. With direct query, if a visual is using a field from a table that is part of direct query, it sends that query out there, comes back. So the experience sometimes, from a performance perspective, you're putting a little more workload on the SQL Server side.
Right.
But let's say we have like a list of countries or a list of companies that we're using as like legends within our visuals. This is something that's not going to be changing too often.
Right.
So what we could do is effectively what we're doing is changing one table into import. But it's important to note, you can turn these tables into import. We're going to see they've added a new option. If you choose to turn something into an import, you're effectively turning everything that's part of that data set, that data source, to import.
Okay.
So dual lets you choose for our example, one of the 4, let's say, to do the import, that import behavior.
Makes sense, yeah.
So very critical. It definitely has impacts from a performance perspective. So it's really nice. I mean, they took what we wanted and they've made sure they've kind of extended it across the entire range here.
Let's check it out. So let's see how we can turn on a table for dual mode. So I'm going to look at one of my direct query tables that I have on the right-hand side. You can know that they're direct query because if you hover above them, for one, you'll actually see there's a new little hover over here that shows you the properties of it. And it says the storage mode is direct query for this one. If I go above that, it's going to tell me that this one is import. You can also find that information if you right-click on a table. Let's say dim date. My date dimension is not changing very often. So maybe I want to switch that one to an imported or dual connection. So if I were to right-click on dim date and go down to properties on that table, you'll see there's this field properties menu that came out a little while ago. But one of the properties that's now available in here is the storage mode. And the storage mode for dim date right now is set to direct query, but you can change it to import or dual now. Now again, I think it's worth reiterating what Manuel mentioned is if I switch this to import, all of my other direct query tables are also going to flip to import. If I switch it to dual, just this one table. So I'm going to switch this one to dual. You'll see a little dialog box pop up and say, hey, it kind of describes what's going to happen here as you do that. Now it's going to tell you here that the dim date table will update as your data refresh occurs. So I'll hit OK here. And now it's going to switch. You can see it's actually imported that data. So we've switched this one table. All the other tables are still direct query, so you can see that when I hover above them. But we now have an imported data source, which is my 5 regions table. We have a dual data source, and we have direct query. So that's really it for that one. It's a neat feature. It allows you to, again, like you said, you gave a great example. If you have something, maybe it's a slicer that in your visual that's really static, the data doesn't change a lot. Why not go to that table that is very static and make it a dual data source so that way it will save you a little bit on performance.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right.
And so we talked about there's one more element when hitting that preview box, that preview feature that comes into play here.
Yeah.
So we have, reiteration, we have the ability to do import with Directquery.
Mm-hmm.
We can now turn these things into dual. There's that dual mode option. And the last one actually, for those who do data modeling, this might be a little interesting one.
Yeah.
Remember, these are in preview, so I know there's some discussion on how these will be implemented, but the fact that it's here is what's great. But this one is actually being labeled many-to-many relationship.
Okay.
But as we all know, and we've seen when you're in the relationship view, when you're examining it, there was a section under cardinality that's been there for the longest of time that says many-to-many.
Okay, yep.
So the approach that's happening here is really to answer a common workaround that we've done. Whenever we have two tables that had non-unique values, that there was a relationship there. We had to create a bridge table.
Yes.
That would contain all the unique values. So we'd connect it, and then we can do cross-filtering, so on and so forth. It's basically eliminating that need. So it now allows us, because if you've ever tried to draw a line between a non-unique to, you would get this pop-up message, which that message has changed throughout the couple months, I think, in preparation for this.
Yeah.
But now you can. So you can connect two tables, create a relationship between columns that are non-unique.
Yeah, I think this is going to be especially helpful for people that are new to Power BI, because that's one of the biggest things that we see people do is they'll bring in two tables, not realizing that one of those two tables needs to have a unique value that you're going to be relating them on. And this actually eliminates the need for that in some ways, right? So you can relate these two tables that don't necessarily neither have a unique value.
Yes.
And still be able to connect to them. Now, you've got to realize also that's going to impact the data that you present, but it's a great new ad for especially new people here.
And I'd say in the realm of, like, if you're knowingly going to be using, the idea of you leveraging many-to-many isn't by any means, like, beginner on the idea of it. So what's nice is there's still a message that pops up when you create this type of relationship, letting you know what you're doing. And I think that's incredibly important, too, because we don't want people just to nilly-willy make relationships, because there needs to be understanding, like you said. If you're going to create a visual based off of a many-to-many, that's going to impact it.
Right.
So
what I thought might be interesting here is before we show it in the new design, the new in July release, let's actually show it in the old one. So I'm going to bring over my June release here. And I did switch these all to imported now. Yep. Every table is imported, and I actually...
Because you had to.
I had to, right? Because I had to. And then I want to show what would happen if I were to attempt to do what the new release will actually fix for us. So if I go over to my relationship view here, and inside of my fact table, I have a region table, a region column. And then inside this 5 regions 2008 table, which is basically this table just has some temperature information in it, just to give you some idea of what it looks like. You can notice here that my region column is not unique, okay? Although that is the column that I want to base my relationship on, because I don't have anything else. So if I go to my relationship view and I drag the region from my mini table to my regions and my regions table, we're going to see they're both not unique. So this is really the concept of why it's called many-to-many here, which may be confusing to some others that have done a lot of data modeling. But the reason why it's called many-to-many is because these little stars that you see here next to the tables, those indicate that that's where there are multiple values for that column that the relationship is based off of. And in this case, we're trying to create, and this is not going to work, a relationship between two minis. It's going to pop open an error and say, hey, you have to have a unique value. So obviously it didn't work. Now, in the new release, that does work. So let's show how that works. If I go to the relationship view now, and I try and design a relationship between region and region again, like so, works right away. Now, so it's going to pop up. It does have here, you'll notice the cardinality, a many-to-many relationship. It also pops down on the bottom, says the cardinality for this relationship is many-to-many. It gives you a warning.
And I noticed the default is both for cross-filter direction as well.
Right. So if I hit OK on this, you'll see it designs the relationship, but look even closer. If you look really closely, you'll see the relationship types here are many-to-many. Now, that's not something you could do before. This is brand new. Yep. Always previous, you had to have a one-to-many, and like you said earlier, Manuel, if I wanted to do something like this, I had to have some kind of table between them that would be the unique values. So I'd have a bridge table between. This would be my mini to what would be a 1 in that unique table, and then bridge it over to the regions table. Yep. So that's great. We were able to do that, and just to prove out that it worked, I can bring into my report. Maybe I'll bring in something like the temperature column that I have here from my regions table. Let's bring it into a bar chart, so make it a little more interesting. And then from my fact internet sales table, I will bring in the sales amount. So you can see, indeed, it does work.
Perfect.
It's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of wraps it all together. The one little button in the preview feature.
Yes.
That's everything. So it's a large pie that you can bite different pieces out of because there's a lot there.
So right now, all of those features are being bucketed underneath that composite model checkbox. Like you
Absolutely. So tons of stuff. And like I said, this is something that we definitely want to. It's going to be available here in this July as a preview. But we want to keep an eye. This is something very big, very impactful. So we got to see the nature of the changes that will come about from it.
And I would expect a more detailed blog from Microsoft specifically on this feature because it is so big and so many people have been asking for it. You'll see something probably more specific on that. Yeah.
So that is the first part, and that really covers like kind of the modeling aspect of what's happening in this release. So what we'll do, we'll switch some gears, I guess, and we'll move over to more the reporting side of things. Which a lot of people do enjoy and they find fun and fancy, but we actually have
fun and fancy.
We actually have multiple things right in front of us.
We do.
That are already part of it, and so we have the best viewers, the best audience. So they probably already said like, "Oh, I see this, I see that, I see that."
Yep.
But just in case for the newcomers, let's talk about header changes.
Oh, header changes.
Yeah.
Wow, I was not expecting header. Okay, I knew it was coming, but. So let's look at our screen here. If you may have already noticed, like Manuel said, there's a few things that are actually in front of your face right now that are different than normal. One of which is the headers on your visuals. So if you notice here, is anything different about this? I think so.
It might be a little bit tricky, but if we give them a taste of the old, then they'll know what's different.
Let's show the old. So there's a new feature here with the headers that you're seeing, but maybe not realizing. And if I turn off that feature, which you can do by going underneath File and Options and Settings and Options, and if you go to the report settings, you'll see there's this Use the Modern Visual Headers header with updated styling options. So if I turn this off, this will actually look very familiar to you.
So we have a dedicated header.
Yes.
Now I see it, right? In the previous when we turn this on, effectively the header, it doesn't take up its own area.
Right.
It becomes part of the title.
Yep. Gotcha. So they've made some changes with this where it's actually kind of brought down. You don't see these two lines anymore. To be honest, I kind of like this because it's really obvious on where to click. We'll show you what I mean by that, why I kind of liked it a little bit before, but there's some new things that are really cool as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that just gives you a little bit of, I guess, space-saving components to it. I mean, granted, this is more for us as creators, right? Whenever we go out and we deploy this, and some of these elements aren't really going to impact the readers so much. But from a report creator perspective, definitely it consolidates some space there.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to turn on the new feature again. Let's go back to it. Underneath File and Options again.
And I feel like the naming convention there, modern. Look, they'd like the term fun and fancy.
They do.
I might need to send that
they
to
do
them,
like we're gonna entitle this episode #Fun and Fancy.
Fun and fancy.
All right, so I've turned the header section back on here.
Yep,
the new modern style. You can see the difference for sure now.
Absolutely.
And the thing that I think I struggle with most, and it's probably just because I've been working with Power BI for long since it's been released now, but I got so used to clicking above here. Now you got to click within side of the chart to move things around. So that's the big thing. So you'll notice when you get things kind of too high, you'll still see where you can do the focus mode here. You'll have your more options here. Things kind of shift around a little bit, I've noticed, when depending on where your chart is. And I was trying to simulate it a little bit here, where I've actually seen this focus mode and buttons, these shift to the bottom in some cases.
Yes.
So there's some things that are interesting with this, but let's kind of show how this feature works. So the nice thing that they've done is they've made it more compact, and also there's some additional settings to the headers now.
Correct. That's a big piece. This is just the aesthetics, the front-facing look, but as you said, there's a ton of styling options now in regards to this. Quite a few, actually.
Yeah, so let's take a look at where it's at. So you would select your visual, go over to the Format section, and then towards the bottom, the second to last section here is Visual Headers. And if you expand that, you'll see there's quite a few, and I'm not kidding, there's quite a few settings to do with this feature. Now, tell us a little bit about what happens when you enable these. Well, I see them here.
And this is the big thing. There's so many choices here. These are critical, and a fair amount of these are very important from the report development side of things.
Right.
So when they're disabled here, you will not see, of course, if you turn off the header, I think that it actually does go away.
Yes.
But the smaller options, like you don't want to display the focus mode. things such as that, you only will see this when deployed to the service in reader mode.
Right. So we can make all sorts of changes here. I can uncheck things here. We're not going to notice anything different until, like you said, we actually deploy this to the server.
Yeah.
Now, there are a few things that you can kind of tweak a little bit. You could do things like, if we wanted to, we could change the colors up top here. So maybe we want let's say the border color here, maybe we make it a yellow, and maybe the icon color we make a yellow. And you can see that this does impact it here. So there is some change here. But for the majority of these changes, you're going to see these once you actually deploy them to the server. So again, just to point that out. And again, it's just to make life a little easier, but you have the option now to change the colors if you want. So some interesting little tweaks there that you can do. All right, I'm going to revert that back to default. Again, like I said, you can make all the changes you want here and then publish this out, and then you'll see those on the service.
So one thing, I think we're going to save this to the end, but we're going to show you a couple more things in the reporting side, but something to bring note so you can pay attention to it. You know, sometimes you gotta appreciate the small things, right?
Yeah.
There are new, and you might have noticed, little animations. And twerks when you're working now within the actual visualization pane as a whole. You might have noticed as we were flipping through, and you'll notice definitely as we're going through this, just small animation shifting from one to the other, just expanding a box. And also, which is nice, you may have noticed now with the options, whereas before it would say turn off the focus mode icon. And then the toggle switch would be off to the side.
Right.
And a lot of times, if you weren't certain what it said, you would drag it out to see it. Everything is listed now. The option, so you have the title and the option directly underneath. So it's nice, it's clean, it's compact. And like I said, the fun animations brings it to life a little bit more.
Yeah, you'll notice this again as we go through. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but you'll notice a little slide back and forth here. Yeah. You can actually see, if we go into some of the properties of a visual here, that the label for the property is above the property that you can change now rather than to the left of it, like you said. So a lot easier to actually read the items in here. Now it's going to make you're going to have to scroll some more probably here to work with these visuals, but it is a nice little change here for you. I
appreciate that more because expanding that pane out to the left reduces your working space for the report. So I'm fine with scrolling down. Simple change, but I said small change, but I appreciate.
Now the next one we're going to look at is also an aesthetic change.
It's right here in front of us too, isn't it?
You've already seen it. You don't even realize it, but it's something called wallpaper.
Some people who are very specific, let's say, attention to detail, they probably notice it immediately.
Yes.
It seems like we have a ton, not a ton more, but there's more space to us. There's this dotted gray line here.
Yep.
There's more white around the sides. Now, just to know the reporting canvas, that's not changed.
Right.
The space that we have to work within, that remains the same, but now wallpaper.
Yeah, so you'll notice that, like you said, this dotted line that shows around the outline here of your design canvas, and beyond that, it's white. Now, if you remember back to previous versions, so I'll bring my old version over here for a moment, you always had this kind of gray output there. So if I were to open up another menu here, you can see that gray a little more around the design surface. Now, what they've changed is that area beyond the report design surface can actually have wallpaper now.
Correct.
Now, the purpose of doing this is it really just extends, especially when you deploy to the service, you'll be able to have this theme show out throughout what you see on the screen inside the service. Rather than just this design surface here for your report, you'll actually see beyond that, as obviously people are going to have different resolutions, and it'll actually allow them to see beyond your report the continued theme, basically.
Absolutely. This is really going to be, for those who love having those, you put images for those backgrounds that would kind of underlay, I guess you would say. This just gives it even more of an expanse.
Yep.
It really does. And then and we'll see this when we go out to the service, takes up a lot of space.
It does. So let's get to this one here. So in the design surface we have here, again, you can see the dotted line. And if I go to the properties of the report, so just select somewhere in the background and go to the Format Paintbrush, you'll see there is a wallpaper section here now that was not there before. So I'm going to go to the underneath wallpaper, and I'm going to add an image in here now. And the image I have is, the Power BI logo.
Just so happens.
So I'll select Power BI here, the logo. And you'll see that takes up the entirety of not only the design surface of my report background, but also behind the report background or beyond the report background, the wallpaper area. And a few things here, you can change the transparency of this if you want. You can actually change the fit to the image if you want it to actually fit versus be fill or whatever you want to do. You have the ability to kind of change that around some. And then on top of that, the other change that they made is in the background itself, the background is now 100% transparent.
Correct.
So if you add a wallpaper, you will be seeing the wallpaper, not the background of the report.
Correct. Yep.
And so one strategy might be maybe you just make the wallpaper a color, and then maybe you make the
kind of like a bordering element.
Yeah, it gives it kind of a bordering element, so you can play around with this quite a bit. It's going to be an interesting feature to see how it works. And you'll see if I were to open up my web browser here. Bear with me here. Here's what it looks like from the service. So from the service, you're seeing here, and it's a little, I didn't do a good fit here. It's not fit to screen very nicely. But here's what the wallpaper looks like. So here's my design surface of my report, and then we're seeing beyond the report shown here as well. All right. Cool. So our next one then is going to be some additional little features around tooltips.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody loves tooltips. It's been a couple months now, but we had the introduction of report page tooltips.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure a lot of people have started just to take advantage of that. There's some fantastic functionality of that element all by itself. But there were two sad visuals that have been left out for a long time.
Yes.
Not just report page, tooltips in general.
Yep.
Our good friends, the table and the matrix. They finally got into the cool gang.
Yes.
And now with the there's a lot of asking about report page tooltip for table matrix. The response was, but they don't even have regular tooltips. But they brought them both to us now.
Yes. So let's take a look at it. So I'm going to bring in a simple table here. I'll just bring in a table. And in this table, I'm going to bring in something like the country. I'll search for it to find it a little easier. And we'll bring in the country and the sales amount. And so we'll let's go ahead and type the full thing out there. There we go. And so I'm not so concerned about the rest of designing this table, but really the key thing I want to show you is tooltips on this. Now you'll notice that when I hover above this that the tooltip is not engaged yet. I need to actually go turn on the tooltip for tables and matrix. To do that, I would go over to the format section. You'll now notice there is a tooltip section that wasn't there before, and I can turn it on. And by turning it on, you can see here that I can now see a tooltip, very nice, for my tables. Now, the other thing is you can also use report page tooltips with this.
Yes, you can. And we just so happen to have one.
I happen to have created one without telling you ahead of time.
Magic.
So here's the one that I created before we started the video. And I want to make that report page tooltip work on this table. So to do that, again, you'll go to the format section of the table, go underneath tooltip, and we're going to change it. It's already selected to report page, but it's selected to auto. So we want to make sure we tell it explicitly, hey, we want to use page 2 as our report page tooltip. And so now when we hover above here, you'll see our line chart and our other items show up on our table as well. So very cool stuff. Really cool feature that you now have the ability to do this not only on your other visuals, like your normal visuals you would have, or you can also do it on tables as well.
Tables coming in like a wrecking ball.
That's right.
No tooltips to all of them, all in one go.
This
is fantastic. Well, the last piece is actually something right now it's perfect. We can actually use this report page tooltip that we're leveraging.
Yeah.
It's a line chart there. And we had a previous example. We talked about the line chart or the combo chart where we could control the width of the line and you could actually make it go away. And you can have just dots. It's another visual element here that's been added in for line charts. It's going to be found in the same section, that shape section that we showed in the previous one. We can actually move from that gradient line there to a stepped appearance. Yeah,
and you can do this both on combo charts and line charts.
Yep.
So let's go take a look at it real quick.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go over to my page 2 where I actually have my line chart. I'm going to select this visual, and what I want to do is rather than have this nice smooth way of visualizing it, I want it to be more rigid, stepped kind of thing. And, in this case, I might not do that if I was actually building this. This is a line chart looking at trending, but if I had this for something else, maybe not trending, then I might do something like the stepped approach. But for any rate, here's how it would work. I would select the visual, go over to the Format Paintbrush, and you'll find underneath the Shape section, they made a lot of changes here lately, like you said. And then here you'll see there's an option here called Stepped. And if I turn on Stepped, notice the change. So pretty significant change to it. If I were to now go look at this, inside my tooltip section, it should work there as well. Very nice.
So it's just like you said. I mean, it's the same reason why we were talking about the stroke width, reducing that to 0. If there are certain circumstances, I think very likely in the combo chart, this could have a great look.
Yeah.
Where when it's over time, you want to kind of see that trend. Like how intense is that line? Is it really skyrocketing up? But if it's two different measures that really don't have an over time element here, no trend, either stroke width or now the stepped are great options for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Perfect options.
Now we do have one last small feature.
Oh, so it was the coming back on stage for the final song.
For the final, yeah.
For the encore.
But one more thing.
Yes, exactly right.
So the last thing I want to show you guys is around sorting. There have been some sorting changes that have been made. And those, I think it's a welcome change. It makes it a little bit more understandable of how you can actually turn on sorting on a visual. So rather than describing it, let's just go look at it.
Absolutely.
So we have a couple visuals we can enable this on, but let's look at it from our bar chart here. The same way you would get to sorting before, you would go underneath more options. If I select more options here, you'll see there's been a change here. So you now have the option to select this sort by property. And you can select which field you want the sort to be based on. So I can say I want to sort it on temperature range.
Okay.
And then I can go back in here and I can tell it whether I want to sort that value ascending or descending. And I said that backwards, but yeah, descending or ascending. And so based on you selecting that, you're able to kind of shift around and show those values properly.
Perfect, because I think basically they've just kind of extracted out. It was pretty consolidated because all you had was the sort and then all the various different metrics.
Right.
That was it. So you'd have to, like, if you wanted to pick, it'd be sort temperature.
Yeah.
You'd have to push it, and then if it had the line next to it, you'd know it was descending or ascending, and then you'd have to click it again to be ascending. So they've just taken all this out, so there's no confusion.
Right.
You know what you're sorting by, and if it's ascending or descending.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So pretty cool feature. I mean, it's a small change, but it's a nice one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And guess what? I mean, we're beyond 30 minutes on today's thing,
Ooh,
but
hopefully
hey,
you're still with us here.
Guess
Good
what?
Stuff.
There's actually more than this that we're not showing. We just picked some of our favorite features. Definitely go read up on the Power BI blog, the update of what's actually been released this month. A lot of cool things. And many of you are probably actually listening and seeing some of this at the Business Application Summit that's going on right now. And you guys are really going to, I think, enjoy these things. And the things that you're going to learn at that summit, you'll learn a lot about Power BI, of course, but there's also some things about Power Apps, Microsoft Flow. You're going to learn a lot of great things there.
Ton coming along.
Absolutely. But I think that's it for today's Power BI Monthly Digest.
Yeah, absolutely. We thank you guys for, sticking with us. Longer video, but now you know everything you need to know for July, all the really big impactful things that you're going to want to implement right away.
Yep, absolutely. So make sure you, if you haven't already, subscribe to our series here, and we look forward to next month. There's going to be some great things in August as well. Thanks a lot.
Take care.